Hey, welcome back, everybody. It's time again for another episode of Health Talks with Dr. Trent. The one show, maybe the only show that shows you the path to a healthier life. Sometimes it starts with the inner life, with the man who's always very open about his own inner life, Dr. Trent. Welcome, sir.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure how open that is, but I just woke up, so it's, that's open enough, right?
See, that's you're an open guy, but you're always talking about your spirituality. You're talking about your mental health. You're talking about brain health and healthy brain food and other sorts of things. Today, you got a little bit of different approach to it here. Bring your guest in. Who are we talking to today?
Yes, we're happy to bring on. Is it Shasheen? Is that right?
You got it. That's right.
Yeah, Shasheen Shah, who is an awesome author, has a cool book we want to learn about today, The Kid and the King, and how we can all learn from your experience here and what you've written. Yeah.
So welcome to the show, and give us a little bio on who Shasheen Shah is before we talk about the book.
Wow, it's great to be here. I guess what you're not maybe going to see on the page would be live in Santa Fe, New Mexico, a passionate skier. The book's subtitles about re-engaging and reigniting with life, love nature, love being in the outdoors. And it's where I find my peace. It's where I find my connection. It's where I find my joy. And ultimately, from a background standpoint, I'm just someone who's been around a lot of high achieving people, from my parents, through school, through the communities that I've lived in. And I've had an interesting lens into the lives of arguably what we would put on a pedestal of where we want to go, where we want to be, what achievement looks like, whether it's degrees, titles, schools, area codes, zip codes,
living on Balboa Island, like you said a little while ago here. There for everybody in Orange
Balboa
County.
Island, and I lived on Fernleaf in Corona del Mar, and it was quote unquote the good life. And gosh, I mean, it is a good life, and it can be a really good life. But a lot of what I've discovered and the lens through which I've been able to look into that world has been as a trusted advisor to arguably some of the most successful people and some of the most impressive resumes I think I've seen. And, being able to hear the inner dialogue, some of the conversations that we've had on these intimate conversations, and the trust that I've built over the years with my clients, the window into their lives is really telling. And it's been said by many people over and over. I mean, Jim Carrey, I think, is probably the most famous guy that just kept on saying, it's like, hey, you want to make $1 million to be happy. Good luck with that. It's not all about making the money or achievement. There's something else going on. So, my passion and my own self-inquiry into my own dysfunction, my own anxiety, my own confusion about how to get on with life led me down this path. And I feel really fortunate to be able to be on the other side at 51 and being able to share my experience with people.
Wow. That's amazing. You guys, if you're 51, I'm 151 here. I'm telling you. All right. So just before Dr. Trent jumps back in, give us go one layer deeper here. So you're a trusted advisor. What kinds of things? Coach, a financial planner, priest. I don't know what is.
No, great, all great questions. So, my brain was wired for business and strategy. It just seems to be that's the way I was. I was a debater in high school, the logic, the sequencing, and that kind of, how do we get from point A to point B? So I could, and philosophy major in college, deconstructing how things work, how to get from point A to point B was something that my brain really enjoyed problem solving in that way. And while I was, kind of exploring the world of business, I also was on my own personal journey. And that was one of, growing up, and I don't know if you can relate to this, Doc, I had two Asian parents, right? They were both Indian doctors, and, education was paramount. And, in Scarsdale, New York, it was about where you were going to school and SATs and PSATs. And I was the only kid that was brown back in the 70s when I was a kid. And I honestly felt like I was waiting for Scotty to beam me up back to the planet that I belonged to. I didn't seem to get it. So I heard someone say, the day they were handing out the instructions on how to go through life, I must have been absent that day because everyone else seemed to get it. So, between my, family dynamics, arguments with my family, my mom and my dad and all of that growing up, I kind of jumped into the world of therapy and personal development and looking at what it is to be human. And so somewhere along the lines, like the rivers of like personal development and business strategy merged. And I realized that, it's the business is not that complicated. It's the people in business that are really complicated. And, when you start getting a group of people within a management team or a group, the various different aspects of their own backgrounds, their own experiences, how they've been conditioned really plays a role in how they communicate, how they interpret things, and how they interact. And so when it comes now, to the execution of the strategy, you've got this other layer that unless you deal with that effectively, it's like having, being, rowing and having one rowing at different times, and you'll get there eventually, but boy, it becomes a long, tough, inefficient journey. So that's where I came at. That's where it came to.
So were we saying business coaching and personal development? Those are kinds of things.
Yeah. So, my clients are typically CEOs and leaders of companies, leaders of big departments, and men and women. And please, with the title, The Kid and the King, I wanted to put /Queen, but the cover people and the data were like, you can't do that. I was like, okay, it's to keep it with the Kid and the King. This is as much for women as it is for men. And in fact, my client split is about 50% women and men. And, I think the luxury that I've had is that I haven't had to sell my services really. My clients have been all referred back in, so they know what they're coming into. And I would argue it's a combination of, some of the experiences my clients will have is they've either they've had a big infusion of cash and now they're expanding rapidly, and suddenly, there's a whole new level of people dynamic, so a lot of really great individual achievers now have to become leaders. There's some people who have just flatlined. They've reached I always say, if you can afford me, you're obviously doing something really, really well. But at some point they just have stopped. They don't know. There's confusion. They're kind of out of fuel. And so that will be another big area that we get into. And they were like, well, I want to get the company going. I want to hit this goal. So it starts with that. There's something out there that if we got that, this would be a useful thing. And what we find is that there's just this is why the subtext of the book is the hidden inner struggle. And that is, you get into this idea of, it's not the situation, it's not the circumstance, it's your relationship to that circumstance, it's your relationship to those things. And that opens up a whole world of how people got to where they are today, what success strategies they've used to get there. A typical example, and I think we can all relate to, or these high achievers, or at least in my little Asian Indian community, that can, it's like this, discipline and focus and get a coach and get, you can just kind of squash that procrastination out of you. You can squash that distraction out of you. You can just crush that side of you, suppress that side of you so that you could get to that next level. And here's the thing, the biggest challenge, and the reason really why I wrote this book is those strategies, they're there and they're popular because they work, right? You're going to lose the weight. You will get an A on that test. You can do better on your SATs. You can get promoted. You can achieve. You can make that next financial. You can ring that next bell. And those strategies will get you there. The problem is that, at least that I've found, and my clients have found, and the reason I think why they come is that after they've rung that bell, they've climbed that ladder, there's a disconnect between the expectation of what that was supposed to bring, like happiness and joy and respect and admiration. And what they find, probably the most common trait of someone that has pursued that path is a sense of being alone, misunderstood, and the most the deepest relationships of their lives, whether it's their spouse or kids or their parents, are strained, or they're quote unquote, I love it, we're fine, we're good, we're fine, we're fine. And there's just this separation that exists in that world. And I think for those people who, you know, that find me, that's the place where I think the biggest opportunity is, because as soon as that stuff gets handled, it's amazing what's possible. And I think the experience of life is really what this book is about, and what my practice has been about, is how do we experience life with greater joy and
so
freedom.
They get their Dr. Trinh, they ring the bell, and it doesn't ring true. What do you think? Does that ring true to you?
Yeah. There's a difference between, you know, accumulating a bunch of lines on your resume versus really, conquering and actually saying, you know, this is what I want, right?
Oh yeah.
And this is what's good for me. You know, we all think we know that there's something there. If I get there, then everything else will, whatever I'm feeling now, whatever uncertainty, problems, relationship issues, all that's going to get better on the other side.
Very good. Yep. Destination living, you know.
Destination living. I like that. Yeah. Are we all stuck in destination living? Because here's a man, Dr. Trent always amazes me. Half the time, I don't know that he knows where he's going tomorrow here. He's got to show up for this. He's got to do that. And part of it is because he's got all these million things he's doing. But sometimes, do you have this grand vision, 6-year, 10-year, 20-year plan, Dr. Trent? Are you trying to do it? Are you just doing as much as you can?
It's just untreated ADD.
That's what it is. Okay. All right. It's simple then.
I can relate.
It's very simple.
Oh, yeah.
So why write a book on all this? Why tell the world what we probably know deep down inside, that money doesn't buy happiness, and success has got to start within before you can bring it to others here, right? I've heard this
it's
before.
Like I hear that out loud, and it just kind of makes me cringe, right? It's like some little saying that you see on the back of some Hallmark.
I got one right here in my coffee mug.
It's on my tea bag, you know. I'm like, oh, look, happiness, find it within, you know. Go find. I mean, you know, you gotta like take this with a grain of salt. But like the truth of the matter is, for me and my clients, like I went through. Someone asked me this question. I was like 2 weeks ago, and they're like, well, why'd you write the book? And I took a second, and my answer was, I wish my 16-year-old self could have read this book and understand kind of how human beings, like the person, the hardware, the limbic system, how our brains process information, and how we are wired for survival. And we are wired to make judgments about things, and how our brains take in and process information. It would have made life so much easier, I think, in terms of this feeling of, I don't know. Arguably, my life has been nothing more than trying to overcompensate for like deep insecurities of not being good enough, not knowing what I was doing, being uncomfortable, and just learning how to get up every day, put on a smile, shake your hand in the right way with a good form, put your shoulders back, and come on, Shasheen. And it was just this, I don't know, show that, one of my clients is like, I was a dancing monkey for my whole life. My God, I'm so tired. And so it really, I love my stuff. I love the achievement. I love, being in beautiful environments, and that takes resources and it takes achievement. I think that you can have both. I don't think you have to keep suppressing this side of ourselves that I call the kid in the book. And I think that's essentially the core message of this book. The distinction between the kid and the king is that, in my experience, the relationship with those two parts of ourselves is somewhat adversarial. Like, we're like, shut up, don't talk, don't, insecurities, depression, sadness, anxiety, we squash it, we crush it, we suppress it. The premise of the book is, why not actually learn to understand? And this, again, when I say this out loud, it sounds like, well, understand that part of you better. Well, yeah, what if you actually just saw it as a part of your life, the yin and the yang. This is that part, the fear that exists. It's going to be there. It's just going to be there. My brain's going to keep barking at me. It's listed demands, needs, wants, and desires all day long. When I get up in the morning, when I go to bed, it's going to talk to me. Why not? I mean, well, I'll give it. One of my mentors said to me years ago.
He's asking the question. He's going to answer it right here.
Hold on, but yeah. he said this to me. He said to me, he's like, Shasheen, you're not that interesting. And I said, wow. I said, what? He's like, you're not that interesting. He's like, you got the same patterns, the same story, the same stuff. You're an Indian kid with scars in New York. Your dad was a doctor. You got a 99 on your test, blah, 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 blah. So you have this story that keeps repeating itself. You still have these feelings that keep showing up, but it's predictable in your most intimate relationships with authority figures, with people that are this way, or with the tones that when people use this word or this style of speaking, it upsets you. It's like you're just this predictable trigger machine. And, we come and we talk and you're triggered and you're upset and you're pissed off about this and that. He's like, that's what your life sounds like right now. He's like, why don't you get responsible for it? And so that was the moment I was like, well, what does responsible mean? I can't keep crushing it because I've tried all those. I've tried all that. I even tried medication for a little while and that didn't work. And so finally it was like, well, what if I actually, before I walked into a situation, understood, even when I'm going live today, I'm like, oh my God, we're going live. I didn't realize it was live. I just thought it was a podcast. I got to get the camera ready. Yeah. I got to be, oh my God, that voice is sitting right here. Predictable. My hair's not right. I probably should have worn a different sweater. My eyes look a little. I mean, it's just.
I was thinking the same thing. I wish you'd worn a different
Paul, I know
sweater.
when we first got on, I felt that coming from you.
I said, I got the right mic, but that sweater, I don't know if that's going to work today.
It was the mic. I didn't think the mic was my overcompensation. I was high behind the mic.
He's got the right mic here. So there's a lot there. Let's unpack it.
Let's unpack some of that stuff.
All right. So what do you think, Dr. Trent? Is this the typical the problem of too much success? I grew up in that kind of environment. You didn't grow up in that environment.
And sometimes, sometimes success is driven by life experiences that that aren't necessarily positive, but life experiences that maybe we had some kind of emotional trauma or excessive pressure, and we've learned a certain way to live and a certain way to get our A's in our class, right? When you're in school. But when you get there and you get your A's in your class, you're like, is this it? Right. Am I really fulfilled? I got this ideal job, I got this position. Am I really fulfilled? Because here's when you're there, you look around and sometimes it's lonely at the top as well.
Here's my question, though. This is a really good bookend. Shasheen, if you had listened to the last show, Dr. Trinh had a woman on who's an opinion editor for USA Today, and she's Vietnamese, like he is, and like him, she wrote a book about the immigrant experience coming over like they both did. Literally the fall of Saigon, hanging onto the helicopters, riding the boats, all that stuff. And both, like Dr. Trinh, that didn't stop them. Maybe that motivated them. Maybe that pushed them. And how then she's saying kids, her kids and her next generation after that, they don't have that same, they've got other questions. Their only question was, how do I survive to tomorrow? And I don't know if your parents were immigrants or if they're second or third generation, but at some point that immigrant experience, my father grew up in that immigrant experience, raised by a grandmother who came over from Poland and very poor. And he used to just say, I'd ask the kind of questions you're asking, especially as I'm growing up in an affluent neighborhood. And he'd say, just go get a job. Just put your suit on and go do something. It was not, there was no great questioning. He grew up poor and desperate. And he didn't, there was no great hope of what do I want to do? How about just get a job, do something, go in any direction, just go. And I kept wanting to stop and choked up. I just want to stop and look and say, but is that the right one? The right one, just go anywhere. So we've all been programmed to be like this. And it's for some group that seems to work. And then it's suddenly the group that follows along, I say it's the second or third generation, starts to say, really? Is that, I see it got us here, but is that really where I want to go? What do you think of that?
Is that for Doc or me?
For you, is this a disease of the second and third generation here?
I think it's just this disease of human being, but you're right though. My mom and dad, immigrants, educated in India, got off the boat on the West Side Highway in New York with $10 in their pockets. They had at Bronx Lebanon Hospital, were in the dorm room together. They figured out a way. They got married on the boat. They didn't have enough money to take pictures of the snow for the first time when they saw it in London. I mean, they were truly like, it was about survival. And they'll tell you the story of like, we take the bus or we get a slice of pizza. We get the bus or the slice of pizza, right? That was the deal. And that, they didn't have time to contemplate their navel like a philosophy major at Colgate University. Like I had the luxury of doing, or living in Scarsdale, New York with tutors and all of that stuff. So their whole thing was like, look, man, if you could get yourself into an Ivy League school. And again, I failed at that moment because I went into Colgate and not, Harvard, Princeton, Yale, Dartmouth, right? Stanford. My sister went to Brown. Thank God she became a doctor. God bless. And my parents
took the pressure off.
God. It was the eldest one that didn't get there all the way. But, it is that. And so it's interesting now. And the reason why this book is really dedicated to my mom and my dad. And if you look in the last chapter, the last chapter is called The Greatest Gift, because it is about the appreciation of my dad and who he was and what he did. But here's the interesting part. It was probably about 15 years ago, I decided to go, as I was doing my own work, I was really interested in this idea of, well, no one's intentionally waking up and saying to themselves, you know what, I'm going to go mess with Shasheen today. I'm going to say some stuff to him that's going to just mess him up, and it's going to sit on his shoulder for the rest of his life, and he's going to ruin relationships and blow up opportunities. You know what, I'm going to say some stuff to him today. That's what I'm going to do. No one has ever said that. My dad has never said that. And I went back to go talk to my grandfather, and I sat when I interviewed my grandfather. And I said, here's the story. My gosh. So my grandfather married this woman in India, and he was in the country. His mom didn't like his wife. So he said, I'm out of here. Done. I'm moving to the city, and I'm going to do that. My dad, same thing. Married my mom, didn't like my mom. My dad said, I'm out of here. I'm going to the United States. We get to New York. What do I do when I'm out of college? I'm out of here. I'm going west, and I'm going to go do my thing. And it's all of this intergenerational, just trying to be seen by people. In the last chapter of the book, I talk about that moment where I actually went home, and instead of carrying this chip on my shoulder, I just said to myself, like, well, what do I want from my parents? What do I want from my dad? What do I want from him? I was like, I want him to be interested. I want him to be loving. I want him to be curious about my life. I want him to be all of these different things. And I said to myself, I'm like, wow, I'm none of those things to him. And it was the moment where I kind of just like grew up and stepped into this adulthood and just said, well, who do I need to be to give all of that to him and just be able to give that freely? And I remember my first reaction was, no, he owes me. And I do really remember that moment thinking to myself, like, I can't live if I can't be emotionally generous to those people who literally had every one of my best interests in mind. Execution, whatever it may have been, we can always argue in hindsight, could they have done better, right? But there was never any malintent. And if I, at this stage, I was 40 years old and could say to myself, I'm still on this like kind of righteous, they're over there. Like, I'm ultimately being victimized. And if you live with that victimization, it can fuel you to go be successful. In fact, what made my dad a successful surgeon, arguably my dad would tell you, is like he was pissed off at his father, and that's what made him successful. But now at 70, in his 70s, he's looking, he went to his first Vipassana this last summer. He went into a silent meditation for 10 days to just go see what was there. And he's taken on meditation, and he's looking at all of these other things now. So I don't know, right? I think people have to do what they have to do to get to where, if it's survival at that moment, it's survival, head down, get it going. But at the end of the day, the inadvertent consequences of having your head down and not looking at the bigger picture can be, there's some pain, there's some sadness, there's some loneliness that comes with that. And so it's not like one's good and one's bad, or one's better, one's not. It's just a way to shine some light and say, hey, no one's asking, at least I wasn't asked when I was a kid, hey, what brings you joy, Shasheen? How can you turn that joy into a career? What makes you happy? It was like, no, suck it up, get a job. And in fact, when I told them that I was a philosophy major in college, I was like, what? I'm paying $120,000 for you to contemplate. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Get a skill, get a job.
That was my dad's philosophy. Now, Dr. Trent is one of the few, you haven't met him here before, but I got to tell you, he's one of the more childlike kings I've met. He's got more kid in him. He loves to stick his tongue out. He calls his medical missionary tongue out because he wants them to get their tongue out. And then he goes on television shows and sticks his tongue out and does crazy things. Somebody came on a show and was talking about, why don't you immerse yourself in frozen water? And what does that do? He says, okay, let's try it. So we did a show on that where he just jumped in a bucket of ice water with a bunch of
Wim Hof stuff. Yeah.
Wim Hof. Oh yeah.
Love him, baby. Cold showers.
Yeah.
There you go.
And I'm like, and he's just always got that curiosity about him. Why did it not get killed in you, Dr. Trent? And how does it get killed in so many of us?
Ooh,
we're gonna get you to get real.
I just follow my curiosity. Maybe I'm just a rebellious kids who don't have a lot of boundaries, and so I get to expand beyond that.
But this show, I mean, that's a quick answer, but really, you do so many things in so many different areas. It is like a kid. Let's try that. Oh, that looks good. Let's do that. The time it takes most of us from thought to action is an agonizing period. Yeah, that would be a good idea. Maybe I should change. Maybe I should hire a coach. Maybe I should let go of this stuff. Next day, tomorrow, a week from now, a year from now, 10 years from now, we're still talking about this stuff. Dr. Trent, you strike me as somebody that just goes, okay, let's go over here. Let's do that. Let's see what happens. And that's very kid-like. Yeah. That's not the considered path of the king. The king has to be. Is it responsibility? What do you think, Shasheen? Does the king have to? The king can't be childlike because the king is suddenly responsible, and maybe not just to himself but to others.
So I want to separate that concept for a second. So being childlike and playful and curious is you can call it childlike, but I think that is the king, right? That is truly
that's the king.
That freedom to be out in the world and just have your version of you being out there in the world, right? That you're not, it's unapologetic, right? It's so I would characterize the way I juxtapose the kid and the king in this book is almost a fear-driven response. It's the anxieties, the fears, and the worries, and a self-protective mechanism, right? So an example of the kid mentality for me, I walked into my dad's office with a 99 on my test. My dad's like, what did you get wrong? I said, I don't know. I didn't take that as he loves me so much and he's looking out for my best interest. It was devastating. What I wanted was, fine young man, great job, son. I'm proud of you. That a boy, right? And I didn't get that. In the book, what I'd say is that those childhood experiences, I've heard everything from like horrific sexual trauma and physical abuse to like dad didn't come home and bring home ice cream one day because he lost his job. It's those moments in our childhood, and that's why I call it the kid, that it experienced something at that time that was, for whatever reason, it left a mark. It left a mark in our psyche. And we underestimate, the premise of the book is that we underestimate the extent to which that mark is affecting how we process, see, and interpret the world today.
I know everybody. You got the time? We'll pull the couch out and I'll tell you mine. We got a whole list of them here. I don't know if Dr. Trent's got any, but I got a whole bunch of them here. And most people I know got a whole bunch of them here. And it all is some silly, stupid moment that somebody said, you can't do this, or they didn't give you the right answer, and it affected your life. And I'm going to prove to them, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to be mad at them, or I'm a victim. And all they want to do is go on and on and on about that silly thing. It's like, you were 10, you were 6, you were 8. Maybe it really was horrible. Maybe it was sexual abuse or something really, really bad. But you were 6. And you carry that scar with you, and that affects how you react to everybody from that moment on, because of that one experience. So, Dr. Trent, how do we get past? You deal with a lot of mental. You're not a psychiatrist, but you're.
How do you get past that? You go and you signed up with Shasheen.
That's it.
Yeah.
He digs it out. He slaps it out of you. Read the book.
Oh yeah, you read the book.
I'll tell you, Doc. I tell you, this book is honestly, it's my playbook. For anyone's listening, if you want, this is exactly what I've done and I take my clients through the work. There's exercise. You write a letter to your kid. You write a letter to your parents. You go through and figure out what the duality is. It's chock full. And so if you want to do just pick it up, the audio, the Kindle, whatever you want to do, but just first read it through and kind of digest it and then kind of say, okay, let's get in there. And it's all there. Everything you said, Paul, everything you were talking about, all those different instances they'll come out and people are like, oh, that was so long ago. I did that in therapy, blah, blah, blah. Every single client of mine has done some kind of therapy, has done some workshop somewhere. For me, this is the final, like,
I'm a film buff. So of course I got to go there. Citizen Kane, what drives him the whole movie is he loses Rosebud. He loses his little sled when he's taken away from his mother and sent off to be better, to the better life here. And his whole life is the search for Rosebud.
That's right. And that feeling alive. And we lose that feeling, that the whole idea of, what is it about? It's like, my test is, am I engaged in my life? Am I excited about my life? Do I wake up with a level of childlike curiosity? I check my email in the morning because I'm excited about, there might be another interview or another client might be referred into me, or there might be some good news. Think about that. Think about that for a second. What is standing in the way of you waking up first thing in the morning and being excited about life? And there's a ton to unpack depending on who you are. But in the pursuit of that, in seeing the days that I'm not that way, in learning to look at the world through that lens of just saying, like, am I engaged? If I go to get some coffee am I going to notice that person? Am I going to just try to connect with a smile? Not in some weird, bizarre way, like, hi, like the John Candy, like, approach to life, but just a simple, like, I'm just interested. Like you said, Doc, like curious, right? So I think the moment that curiosity dial starts to drop, that's the sign that's time to turn it back up and just ask.
But I'm trying to figure out who the king and the kid is. I assumed incorrectly that the king is authority. The king is puts on the veneer and the robe and becomes what others want him or her to be. That's all those images I had. And the kid is free and carefree and open and curious.
Okay. Yeah. So let's clear that up. So so in this book, the way I use the kid and the king is someone that's outcome driven. Think of like grace, elegance, just, untriggerable, someone that just walks with ease, like, someone's, done something. Like, I think the lens of the king, the way I would characterize it in the book, is someone that has emotional mastery, that's not getting triggered by all kinds of things, or whether it's whatever, in a restaurant or an employee or your kids or your spouse, whatever it might be, you're just approaching things with a level of ease and grace.
So I'm going to give you my philosophy 101 class. It's the only one I ever took here. And my basic understanding of Stoicism, and Marcus Aurelius, the great emperor and a Stoic writer, who says you can't change what happens to you. You can only change how you react to it. Is that what we're talking about? Is it a Stoic?
100%.
Yeah.
I just got the audio book.
There it is. Look at that.
There you
go. I just got it.
See what I'm talking about? The lag from him from thought to action is about a half a second. It's a millisecond. Others are going to think, I should get that book. I'm going to write it down. I'm going to go look at that book later, next year, next month, next week. And he just got it.
It's and good. I'm so glad, and I want to come back, and when we can go through it together and chat about it, because I'll give you some of the things that I'll give you the first Hold on. The first exercise.
This is the tease, folks. This is the tease, folks. All right,
this is a tease. This honestly was the reason why it got me excited. I went into this therapist's office. She said, it's like, can you just write down 5 characteristics about yourself that you're most proud of, like, who you are? And I said, fair enough. And I wrote them down. And she's like, well, can you write down 5 attributes about yourself that, if you could change, would really improve, your experience of life? And I said, okay. I wrote them down. And this is on page 11 in the book. So I wrote down, I'm gregarious, compassionate, aware of others' needs. I'm intelligent, strategic, and loving. Those are my top 5.
Okay.
And then I went down to the not so great attributes about myself. And I said, I'm a procrastinator. I'm overly critical. I'm judgmental. I'm intolerant, and a rebel. And I was like, oh, God, okay. Rebel. So then this is where the rubber hit the road, right? So I said, a gregarious, intolerant rebel, an intelligent, critical procrastinator.
Yeah, you start mixing them together here.
Yeah, a compassionate, judgmental critic, a loving, intolerant man, aware of others' needs. There was a war within me. And that is really the premise of the book, is like, how can I know myself to be actually a sincerely good human being that really does want to make a difference? And I can engage in activities that like completely run into the antithesis of what I'm committed to doing in the world, whether it's addictive behaviors. I had a real struggle with alcohol and substance abuse over the years. Whether it's procrastination, whether it's sex addiction, porn, whatever. I mean, there's so many manifestations of external solves for this internal struggle. The point of this book was like, let's just get in there, see what's there, put on our boots, walk around, pull all this stuff out, lay it out on the lawn, take a look at it and say, all right, am I keeping this stuff? Am I holding on to this stuff? Am I going to keep burying it? Or can we just get rid of some of this stuff?
So who do we want to end up being, the kid or the king? Is the kid the one that we got to move past and become the king, the master of our own lives? Or is the king the enemy that's authority and holding you down, Mr. Rebel, and telling you must do this and you can't go there?
Yeah, no. So no. The king is literally the outcome-driven person. It's the person that just says, hey, this is what I want. This is why I want it. And this is what I'm willing to do to get it, right? Like, I'm just out there in the world. I'm doing things because I can and because it makes me happy. It's not about the kid is that fearful side that prevents us from taking risk, from doing things, right? Gay Hendricks' book, The Big Leap, I mean, he handles this really well with our upper limit problems, where we get to whatever. Everyone's got an edge. I don't care whether you're Mark Zuckerberg or whoever it might be.
Elon Musk, he's still got an edge.
Elon Musk, they've got an edge, meaning there's a certain level that they hit. And when they hit it, they recoil. And it's just bigger and bigger and bigger, whatever that is. So the premise of the book, and the chapter before the last chapter, is called The Edge. And it's about dancing on that edge, meeting that edge playfully, like seeing that, oh, why can't I restart my career at 55? Why? Why not? This idea that we do things the first time. And we feel like, well, I've never done that before. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to record my own audiobook. I'm not an audio engineer. I've never written a book, right? Why not go after that? And so there's a certain level of conditioning and expectation and being fine that kind of slowly kind of just decreases our world or puts a cap on what we can, see as possible. And in the book, I talk about this in how we talk about things, our language that we use. I had a client of mine who was a director of one of the big, investment banks in New York. And we were talking about, I was living in Santa Monica at the time. And, he's like, God, I wish I could go to Santa Monica. I was like, you should, why not? And he's like, I could never move to Santa Monica. I could never, right? I could never. My wife I could never, right? Like, we say that like it's like the truth.
It's a fact.
And it's like a fact, like it's a thing. And I remember, and I said, let's talk about that for a second. I want you to write down 10 reasons why it would be the best movie of your life. He did. He came back and he wrote down, he's like, well, my wife would actually love shopping and Santa Monica Boulevard, and the kids would be surfers, they're athletic. So he came with this whole list. And I said, look, this is the exact thing I'm talking about. And at that time, I remember the markets were really dismal. The big giant bonuses, those days were starting to go, and he was trying to look for other things. And he ended up leaving, and it was a big deal. And he ended up opening, and the stories in the book about I was like, well, what do you like doing? What, you know, and he'd been working with me for a couple of years. Like, what do you like doing? What do you love? And he's like, I love beer and I love golf. And I was like, all right, well, let's figure something out. Well, secondary golf ball market to him was like something he deconstructed. And he all of a sudden became this collector of secondary golf ball. Of course, he like opens up a plant in Detroit. He's got veterans and like people that were disabled that are scrubbing, you know, old golf balls. And I mean, the stories are extraordinary of how much fun he had for the first time, that playful side of him when he found what he wanted, what would work for him, not some expectation on society or his wife or his kids or his mom or his dad or whatever. He got to go do that. The funny thing about it is he did that and it's still going, but he did take another job in another big investment bank. You know, the economics of that world is solid and he's accustomed to making that kind of money. So he's doing it, but he's doing it in a completely different way today. And that, I think, is the real joy. That's the part, is to kind of put into parentheses all of these things that we think we know. We have this idea of how things, quote unquote, are, and to challenge them and just to see where there's room. Can we pump some more oxygen into that business idea? Can we pump some more oxygen into wanting to maybe travel or maybe give it all up and go on a sailboat or do it? I don't know what it is for you, but for me, it was, you know, moving to New Mexico, living. I mean, I live on this beautiful, I got the sunrise comes up here, the sunset goes over there. I can see it all day long. I love to ski. I try to get 100 days of skiing in a year. And that's my version. And people are like, well, you can build a course, Shasheen, you can do this. And I'm like, you know, I really value my time. I really value the things that I'm doing today. And I got to tell you, I'm just hitting my stride at 51. I mean, this has just been in the last couple of years where, you know, I went plant-based. I decided to drop the booze out of my life. I decided to get some things organized. It's funny. My company was called Coherent Strategies. It could have been easily called Incoherent Strategies. Like, I've done all the work and the research for you. It's just not worth it. You know, so that's what it was for me.
Well, what you've turned around in my mind, I had a completely different idea from the title, was that the kid was where we want to get back to. And you're saying the kid is actually what's holding us back. The kid is filled with fears and triggers and other things. And while the kid is curious and open, the kid's also afraid and been programmed by all these things that happen to them. And we got to move past that inner child and get back to. Correct. That there were experiences and some conditioned experiences that happened to the kid that were, quote unquote, trauma. And that could be big, giant T or little T, whatever that was. But it ultimately checked in this very, you know, there was a time where you didn't want to go to bed at night. You wanted to get up in the first thing in the morning. It was all excited. Like, and it's about me. But then you're like, there's rules, you know, be a good boy, be a good girl. You know, you all of a sudden these things that happened. The premise of the book is that when those things happened, we didn't have the mental, the intellectual, or the emotional like ability to process those experiences healthy. Like you see parents of like some kids whose parents were in divorce. What you will find typically is that the child believes that if they were better, if they did something differently, mommy would have stuck around, daddy would have stuck around, or there was some fault, and they carry that burden with them into their lives. Well, our only fault is that we've run out of time. What do you think, Dr. Trent? Lots of stuff in there. You've got the book.
Man. Dude, we need a part 2, and I completely agree with Shasheen. I think we all look at our lives and our reality through filtered lens.
That's right.
And these filters are based on our past experiences, our childhood, and these aren't necessarily the correct filters. These aren't necessarily the healthy filters, but there are filters.
So the Mickey Mouse glasses, I'm still looking life through. Isn't the right one to look through here?
And I think what Shasheen does is he helps you to take a step out of your world and look at your own filters, and to see are these filters reality, or are these filters just something that you have built up, you know, because it's your personal reality, which is, you know, putting a cap on your life, right? I'm kind of trying to summarize
and
this.
don't we all, we're getting past the triggers. Oh my God, we all have triggers. We all know how to push our buttons, or somebody, you finally give in to somebody and you let them, you teach them the buttons and how to push them. And that's a frightening thing. Love, relationships, friendships, whatever, something here. Part of that is they may not, hopefully they don't do it very often because that's how you stay in your life, but we have these built-in triggers and they're so easily pushed, so easily fired.
And I think, Paul, and I think to leave you with this thought, it's like, if you're listening to this and if you lasted this long in this conversation, I mean, just look into your life. Look at the relationships of your life. Look at your mom, your dad, your grandparents, your children, your spouse, your partner, your business partner, your coworkers, your employees, and see what's there. Can you be emotionally generous to those people? Look at the people you may have amputated out of your life. Who are you holding a grudge against? I think the access point to a lot of this stuff is the nature of our relationships. And I think it's in that we can find the clues that we can start to just kind of break apart a little bit and open up some space there where you can show up in an emotionally generous way. You can be responsible. You can just give freely without this zero-sum game of like my gain, their loss or their gain is my loss. Look there and see what you find. And in that book, what you're going to see is the exercises that, like you said, Doc, will help you understand what's in that filter. Why do I keep getting triggered by the same stuff? It's like being a baseball player and swinging at a pitch high and outside and wondering why you keep striking out. It's like, hey, it's high and outside. Can't you recognize that pitch? Yeah. Stop swinging. That's what's going on, I think.
All right. Dr. Trent, take us out here.
All right, Shasheen, we need a part 2.
Absolutely.
Part 2. I'm gonna be done with this by this weekend. And so I'm sure I'm going to enjoy it. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, pick up the phone and give me a call, Doc. I'd love to chat with you about it. We could do another show. Happy to do so.
All right.
Definitely. Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks so much for coming on today here.
Thanks for the time.
Well, there you have it, folks. If that's not a lot to digest, I don't know. We can't give you more than that. And the one show that tries to give and give and give you answers. What's holding you back from living a healthier life? Right here in Orange County's only community radio station, octalkradio.net. Streaming live from the University of California, Irvine's Beale Applied Innovation Center. Trying to give you some innovative strategies for living.